Okay, so we're going to talk today in the session about using one particular tool. There are others, but this one works pretty well and integrates nicely with Brightspace. Specifically, it's called EdPuzzle to create video quizzes. And first, we'll talk a little bit about why you might want to do that. And, if you have any questions, just jump right in. And say them. But there's a number of reasons why you might consider using video. I've been using video in my classes, pretty much all of them, for about 20 years or 25 years or so. Particularly, it started with online classes, but then I also use them for my face-to-face classes. I take it back, not in all of them, but in most of the classes that I teach, except for the capstone course. Um, One of the good reasons for using videos is that we know that multimodal instruction supports learning, that when students see the same information in different ways, in different contexts, with different cues, it tends to increase the amount that they recall and their ability to transfer it to other applications. Another really common use of videos is just when there's a problem that students are going to have, create a video and share it with them so that they can address that problem. And again, there's many ways of doing that. It could be just a short video you record from your desktop. Another reason for doing this is it supports a flipped learning approach. In my large intro micro class, I'm using a flipped learning class where students get much of the basic content outside of the classroom, where they work through an interactive textbook, and then they watch some videos with some embedded questions in them. And that's what we'll be talking about today. And if you're teaching in an online class, there's a lot of research that shows that instructor-created videos can help increase a sense of instructor presence and immediacy in asynchronous, hybrid, or high flex courses. And in particular, if you're going to do some type of a voiceover on a narrated PowerPoint or something similar, including your image there in a corner of the screen, at least for parts of it when it's not distracting, again, seems to help build more of a sense of connection. But we're not going to focus too much on that. We're going to talk about where you might get videos. One of the nice things about the tools out there that'll allow you to embed questions in videos is that you could always create your own, but that is a bit of work. As I created a whole new set of those back during the pandemic and for a year or two after that. But you could also use videos created by others. And pretty much every discipline out there, there are hundreds or perhaps even thousands of videos that might already serve the purpose that you'd like to use them for. If you do create your own videos, though, keep it simple and also don't put any information that's tied to the date. You don't want to say, tomorrow we're going to be going on Thanksgiving break, because you might use the same video in another course or in a different semester. Keep videos short and focused. Students in general are much more likely to watch and engage with a video that's short. Attention spans wander. And again, students are used to TikTok and those types of things. In general, if you do create your own, just remember it doesn't have to be perfect. That if there's a cat or a dog or a tarantula walking across your desktop, that again helps create a more humanized presence for you. It is really helpful, though, if you be enthusiastic. We know that emotions are contagious, and that if you make it clear that you're interested and engaged in the material, students are more likely to be as well. And also, again, if you're creating your own videos, using personal examples when it's relevant to the content or the message you're trying to convey to students can be really effective. And in general, a really good way of creating a video, or actually even any class session or any class activity, is start with an interesting question to provoke student curiosity. Because once curiosity is engaged, there's a lot more likelihood that learning will occur. And using narratives and stories, again, is really compelling. That we originally passed on information generation to generation through storytelling, well before we had written languages and so forth. So that power of narrative is really effective. Okay, using examples with emotional impact can stimulate learning. And in fact, there is some research that negative emotions can stimulate learning more effectively than positive emotions and can promote recall. And certainly there's plenty of things out there that can generate negative emotions these days. But on the other hand, we do want to support a growth mindset, letting students know that you're interested in their learning and their success and that you believe that they can be successful. Okay, so these are just some, and one other thing with Title II deadlines coming up, and in general, this is good practice anyway, make sure that any videos you use are captioned and that if you have images on your video, make sure that they're described in the content of the video, because otherwise students with visual impairment won't be able to acquire that information. And we do need to provide equivalent information for all students and for all digital content. And there's a lot of tools out there to do captions. YouTube will automatically do it. Panopto does it. They both do really well. Otter.ai, which is what Zoom uses, also does it really well. And there's a free version of Otter you can download yourself. I use that for our podcast, for example. Okay, now going more to the question of why you might want to embed questions in a video. If you've assigned readings to students or video to students, one of the problems you've probably almost certainly noticed is that students will sometimes not do the readings or will not watch the videos. And a simple way around that is embedding some questions in it that they're going to be graded on. It doesn't have to be high stakes. It could be extremely low stakes. Students, though, are much more likely to do work when they know that they're going to have some sort of a grade associated with it. Watching a video is very passive, and it's really easy for students to be distracted, and there's no immediate check for understanding. So it's really easy for students to let their attention wander. And another is that not all platforms will let you track to see whether students, I'm sorry, I got my mouth and throat has gotten a bit dry after struggling to get Zoom working. That if you want to see whether students had at least skimmed through a video or at least let it run, Panopto does allow you, if you're embedding your videos in Panopto, that will let you track to see what parts of it students watched, how long they were watching it, and so forth. And actually, that's kind of a nice metric. If you're recording your classes, it's kind of nice to see what parts of the class students are going back to look at just to see how it's going. So one solution, and the solution I'm going to suggest here, is to embed those questions directly into the video stream. And we'll go through an example of this in just a second. There's a number of programs out there that do it. I was using a different one until last year. The one I was using was bought up by WeVideo. It used to cost, when I first got it, $150 a year. Then it went to $250, and now, for a class the size of my large class, we're talking thousands of dollars. So I have switched away from that to using EdPuzzle. Panopto also allows you to embed questions in it if you record and post video or post your videos in Panopto, but they're limited to one question per grade. And it does tie into the gradebook. But if you have a video where you might want to check students' understanding at multiple points, you probably don't want to have one grade for every question. The way EdPuzzle works, and most other similar programs work, is that there's one grade for the whole video. So what I encourage you to do is to go to edpuzzle.com and just open it up and then create an account. We'll go through that in just a minute, but you may want to get that open. What it allows you to do basically is grab a video that's either one that you've created or one that you find on YouTube, TED Talks, National Geographic, or any of your own videos, or EdPuzzle videos that other users have created, because once they're created, they're available for anyone. And the platform I used to use, which is now WeVideo, did allow many, many more question types. But again, that's just far too costly now in practice. But it does allow multiple choice or open-ended questions, which at least we can use to make sure that students have done some reading and provide them with a little bit of feedback in terms of some knowledge checks. Multiple choice questions are ones that are graded automatically. Open-ended ones, unfortunately, in this program, you do have to grade yourself. Some other platforms do auto grading, but at this point, EdPuzzle does not. You can also add notes. You can put in an audio note embedded at some point in the video if you're using someone else's video and to provide more information beyond what's in the video. And you could also have pop-up text notes that appear at various places. One thing that's generally recommended is if you're going to do this sort of interactive quizzing within a video is in the settings for the videos, once you load them into Brightspace, is to prevent skipping, because otherwise what students might do, and I know I probably would do this myself if I were a student in the class, is just go right up to the question and try answering it. If I got it wrong, just go back and try again. Basically, this kind of forces students to listen to everything in the video up to the point where they're given a question. So I'd encourage you, if you try it, just to set it up in this way. Now, you probably will want to let students have multiple attempts, but this kind of, again, forces them to go back and listen to everything up to the point where they get a question, so that if they got it wrong, they could get another chance after hearing that content again. The basic workflow, and we'll go through this in detail. Well, we'll go through a practical example of this in just a minute. You open EdPuzzle, and if it's your first time doing it, you can create an account. And I'd encourage you just to create a free account, which you can do by logging in through your Gmail account. I use actually, I would encourage you to use a SUNY Oswego one, because that will be aligned with your role in the class. And I think you may need to do that if you're going to embed the video in a class. You can either create your own video, post it in some online server. YouTube is probably the most common one. Or you can find a video that someone else has created. And we'll go through that process in a minute. You then can crop the video. If you don't want to use a whole portion of it, you could just use a section of it, add any questions, embed them where you want them in the video, and then assign and post it in Brightspace. And again, when you do that, and we'll see how that works in a minute, you will select the number of attempts and also the prevent skipping toggle. And then basically what will happen is it will place everything in there. It will connect it to the gradebook, and it will give you one gradebook entry for each assignment. And they're all graded out of 100-point percentage scale. So it just creates additional video category or video grades or gradebook categories for each video. And what you have to do, though, is as they become active, you create a category in Brightspace for those where you assign some weight. I usually assign them as maybe 10%, sometimes 15% of the grade in the class, which is, basically it's just a way of, again, giving a little bit of incentive. Carol Twigg, who used to run a program encouraging more efficient instruction in large classes, whenever she ran workshops, she used the phrase, freshmen don't do optional. And there is a lot of evidence of that. If you don't have a weight on it, and when I first started putting videos in my classes, I found that the only students who were really using them were those who were getting the A's and the A minus and B pluses anyway. And the students who were struggling were not very likely to use things that didn't have a grade. Putting in a really low weight on any individual video and giving them multiple attempts makes it much more likely that they'll be used. Okay, so this is the first part, and then we'll hop over and actually go through an example in just a minute. But I'd encourage you to try this. It's free, and you can create 20 videos at no cost. If you want to do more than that, then you do have to pay, and I think it's like $200 a year, maybe $150 a year. It's not terribly expensive. And it'll ask you if you're a student or a teacher. Choose a teacher account. Again, I'd encourage you to use your Google login because that will help connect it to your class. And then you create the video quiz. We'll go through that process. Open Brightspace, select a course and the course module where you want to put it. Choose external tools and then EdPuzzle. And then you add the video quiz and set options and it's ready to go. So I'm going to open up Brightspace, but I would encourage you at least to create that account. And then let me see. I had this all set up on the other computer, but I don't have that here. So what we're going to do is I'll bring over, I just logged into EdPuzzle and this is logged in with my my account. Now, these are not videos that I've used. These are just ones because I had selected economics for some of them. Let me maximize, well, let me make this a bit bigger. Okay, so if you want to create your own videos, what you would do is you would go up to, probably the easiest thing is to discover. Well, let's try add new and then just, this was not work. There we go. Here you can browse. Okay, this was working yesterday. It was not working this morning. I was hoping it might now. Forget the add new for a moment and let's just try the discover again. And discover seems not to be working. Okay, well, let's do it this way then. These are videos that were already created related to economics or other things that have been recently created. And what we're going to do, oh, this is a discover. Okay, here you can choose a subject. You can search for a subject. I'll pick economics because that's kind of what I do. And somewhere in there, well, let me just type it. Okay, you can pick whatever discipline you want. If there's one that doesn't align, just pick something close. I think there may be another category too. And here you can look at videos created in Oswego, for example, because you do identify the school when you're in it. Or we could go to YouTube, or we could do, here's, I think, the other sources where you can find other things. Okay. Well, here's a source. Let's say I want to find a video on, let's say income elasticity, just for example. These are videos that it will search for on that have already been used. Here's one created by Joan Wasserman. It's been used by 10,700 students. And he's got a lot of videos on YouTube. And you could pick this if this was useful. Let's say if I just want elasticity, well, this one's been used quite a bit too. So if I just want something on income elasticity, here's an example. I can play it and so forth. And this one is already created. And what happens is you notice there's already a number of questions here. Basically, what happens is these little indicators here tell you there's a question. If there is a hole in the middle of it, that means there's multiple questions at that point. And you can basically, if you want to see the questions, you can either scroll to that and play it, or you can, I thought you could click on it, never mind. But we can scroll to it like this, and there we go. So Nike shoes, it's asking whether they're a normal or an inferior good. Not all the questions are very good, but in any case, here's a variety of questions that people have put in, and you could use some of those. So if you want to use videos that other people have created, you could. But let's say you don't like any of those. So let's say we want to go out to YouTube and just grab the URL. And let's say I want to do something on, well, does anyone have a video they'd like to think about in terms of their classes or some application?
I guess I was actually looking at addictions, and so I got a number of videos that popped up for that.
Okay, well, those are ones that people have already created, and you may find those are good, in which case all you have to do is add them to your library and then go into your class and add them. But if you want to look more broadly, you could do a YouTube search and find what's out there. I don't know. There's probably a lot of stuff on here, and probably a lot of it is junk. That's a long one. You probably don't want a 53-minute one, although if it's really good, it might be worth trying. Um, let's
But when I
see.
when I click on the YouTube tab, nothing comes up for addictions.
Yeah, what you have to do is paste it in, I think, or I think you have to grab the URL. So let's see.
Okay, okay.
Let's just try it. Uh, these are probably a 2-hour video we don't want to play with. Oh, here's one. How does the addictive mind work? It's probably not very good, but let's just grab that and let's grab the URL. And we would find that under share and we will copy that. Okay. And now we're going to go back to EdPuzzle and we're going to paste that in. Okay. So we're going to put, you notice it said as a search term or the YouTube link. So I'm going to put the YouTube link in and now, where'd it go? Oh, this is not good. Well, let's try this. It does not seem to be working so well right now. One more time. I've been using this without any problems all year, and I'm not sure why it's acting up a little bit here. Um, it should just display that. Well, let's see if maybe it went to my content. It did not. Okay. Well, let's try this then. This used to allow you to, oops. Okay, now it is letting us search, supposedly, and we're going to try that again. Command V. And, well, I'm not sure why this is. Maybe that one is not available for search. Okay. Not all videos, if there's no transcript, for example, you can't work with it, and that may not have a transcript. So let's go back and try a
I uh,
different one.
I I copied and pasted a link to a TED Ed addiction video in the chat.
Okay.
If you want to try that one.
Okay. Yeah. Let's do that.
So is it maybe like the YouTube shorts don't necessarily
It
apply?
it may well be. And
Okay.
that's not what I wanted. Let me get to the chat. Okay, so let's try this. It has to be something that has a transcript, and that was probably the issue there. So let's go here. Let's go back to EdPuzzle, paste in the video, and really it is a lot easier than it seems right now. Okay, there's a video. Okay, now this video is 5 minutes 43 seconds long. And what you can do is you can watch it basically and see where you want to embed questions. Now, if there are some versions of this already in their database, it will generate questions. And let's say we want to generate some multiple choice questions. And it did that. And so, if there's enough information in its database from other people who created questions, here's what happens. So, what 3 addictive substances are shown? What can happen to the person who is addicted, and so forth. And if you don't like it, you could just delete it. So let's say you don't really want this one, you could just discard it. If you want to take a different one, we can go here and we can edit it. We can edit it. There we go. And here we go. And you could just replace this with something else. If you want to put in another question, you would just go to some point on the timeline let's say right here, I don't know what's happening. Normally you would watch this, pick a place where there's a logical break, and you would enter, let's say, a multiple choice question, and you would type in, I'm just going to, since I don't know what's going on here, this is a sample question, and let's say this is response 1, and the next one will be response 2, and well, or 3. And then you have to, if there's only 2, you have to make, it won't let you save it until you mark one of them as correct. We'll assume response 1 is correct. You can have up to 6 answers. Once you've put in all your responses, and by the way, for those in math, it does accept LaTeX. It has a little simple equation editor here where you can do some stuff with it. But if you're comfortable with LaTeX, you could directly input something there. So if, for example, we have y, y sub I equals, let's say beta 0 plus beta 1 x sub I, or whatever whatever, as long as you're comfortable with, except that should have been a lowercase beta. Let's say sub 1 and then x sub 1, let's say. And so when you just click return, it will convert that, except I didn't have it. Well, I messed up a little bit there, but you notice it does give you some basic LaTeX stuff. So you can put in math equations at least, or anything that you can create in LaTeX. So you save the question once you created it, and then you would click finished and go on to the next question. If it's already there, this would tell you each of the questions that they've added. And then once you're done with it, you would click finish. And now you have, this has been now added to my, into my portfolio or my library. So if I go back up here, now if I go down to my content, that will be the most recent content that I've added right here. This was one I put in just playing with it yesterday. It was one of those videos that was grabbed. And this is one I actually used. This one I was in the middle of converting, but here are some of the videos I created. And see, there's 2 or 3 questions there, one here and one there. I usually put some questions in the middle and then 1 or 2 questions at the very end, because that, again, does encourage students to read to the end or to view it to the end. This is one of the longer ones. Most of mine are like 5 to 7 minutes or so, but I do have some that go up to 9 or 10 when I just couldn't logically break it. Okay, so any questions about creating an EdPuzzle? And if you don't like it, you can always go back in, click on it, and then you have the option of editing it. And you can then, you could trim it if you want, or add a cut or take a piece out of it, or you could go into the questions and, again, just go to all the questions that are there and then edit them and make them your own. Or if you don't like where the question is located, you can move it around to some other place on the timeline until it's a logical break. I try to set it up so that it will put them right between 2 sentences, or where there's a logical pause in the video. And so I will finish that with the other step. And then the next thing to do is, once you created them, you would go into Brightspace. And I'm going to do that here, which again, I was logged into on my other computer, but good. Okay, I'm still authenticated on this one. I'm going to go into the SELT group, actually, because I did just create a group in there last night. And first, actually, let me go to one where I don't have this. I'm sorry. That would make more sense, because I already did create some EdPuzzles for this, and we'll come back to that. But let me go to my spring classes for just a moment. And so spring, Now, this is a class that I have not yet converted to EdPuzzle. So I'm going to set that up in here. And what will happen here is I'm going to go to some place in here where I could have sworn I copied this over. No content available. I haven't done any work on it. This isn't until 2 weeks ago, so it's not there. Okay, well, let me go to an earlier version of the course. I was not using EdPuzzle last year, but I'm sorry about this. Okay, let's go to spring 2025. And here is a course where I did not use EdPuzzle, but I do at least have some content here. And I'm going to, yeah, that wasn't a very good course because of other issues that I'm addressing now. But let's say I wanted to add an assignment here in EdPuzzle. So you'd go to the module where you want to create the first one. And the first time you do it, you have to create the course and connect it to your EdPuzzle account. So what you would do is you would go down to click on existing activities, and then EdPuzzle-OSW. And it'll ask you some questions at first. So this will be last year's econometrics class. So this will be spring 2025 with the right numbers in there. And the grade level, yeah, one more time. And the grade level will be higher ed. This is used a lot in high school and elementary school too. And again, this will be economics. And I'm going to see if there's any other questions. I think that's it. But just to be sure, okay, so yeah, I'm going to create the class. And now that my account is connected based on my email address and so forth, you may have to do something else because it's already done for me. It may ask you for some questions that you can get from EdPuzzle. But once you've done that, you can then search. So let's say I'm going to actually put in what is econometrics as a video that would be used in the first thing. And I'm going to click next. And here's a video. I don't need to add additional. This is a longer video, but there's only one for that module. And here it asks you how many tries students will have for your assignment. And I'm going to give them unlimited attempts. You could limit it, if you want to. Oh, but that did have multiple choice questions. Maybe not. Okay, let me put a different video in. Let me go back, sorry. So I'm going to go back to EdPuzzle one more time. It should have already saved the parameters for the class. And let me go in a little bit deeper into some of my videos. 34 more here. Well, these are not econometric ones, but let me just put in price discrimination here. There we go. So I'm going to embed that. Next. And now this should assign. And now I can choose the number of questions, the number of attempts. I'm going to set it at unlimited. And I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to keep the prevent skipping on so that students do have to work through all of it. I generally allow students to adjust the speed because if, for example, there are students who are second language learners, sometimes they appreciate being able to slow things down. Anyone has that ability, but if they've already watched the video once and they got some things wrong, I don't see a problem with letting them watch it at 1.5 times or 2 times to get up to the point where they got stuck. Always turn on closed captions, with Title II coming up, that's especially important. And then just click assign. And now it is there. And it's going to be right at the very bottom of the module here. So a student coming to this would just click on this, and they'd be put into that group. They'd watch the video, they'd answer the questions, and once they answer the questions, the grades would go immediately into the grade book. And so that's basically how you do this. Was anyone able to set it up in their course? Did you have to do any sort of codes or anything to connect your account to Brightspace?
All they asked me to do was sign in using my EdPuzzle username and password that I set up on the website.
Okay, and once you do that, it's going to be active in all your classes, which is why I didn't remember how I did that, because I did that last fall. And were you able to embed this?
I
Embed a
was.
video. Okay, now if you want to play around with one, I did stick a couple of videos in on the self group. And if you go to the self, which is in oops, under the no term, and if you go in there, I did create a module last night when I was testing this, when everything was working much better. There is a module here which is called EdPuzzle Example, EdPuzzle Workshop. And if you go there, you'll see two videos. One was a video I created for my intro class, and one was one that I grabbed from the ones that they already had out there. And in that case, the questions were generated by AI. I just wanted to see how that worked. The questions aren't very great. They're pretty low level. I think my questions are generally a little bit better, but but again, I may be biased there. So, so if you want to just see what it looks like for a student, you can play with that. But we can stop the share. Any questions? Does any of this seem like it might be useful? Oops. I'm used to looking at the screen where the camera normally is.
John, with the 20, did you mean to say with the free trial it's going to be 20 in total, or 20 in a day or week, like the way ChatGPT does?
It's 20 total. So, it's something where you can try it, and if 20 videos though wouldn't be, that might be enough for one class.
Yeah.
I think I've got like 90 some videos between, the three classes I created them for. No, two classes I've got them created for now. But I've only ported one of those classes over from WeVideo to EdPuzzle.
Right. And we can always prioritize like which videos we want the quizzes to be on. So yeah. Do you know how much is the paid version cost? Would you happen to know? I can always search.
I should know because I just paid for it last fall. Let's see. What I like about this is that it is integrated into Blackboard, so I didn't have to pay for it. I didn't have to do any additional. I'm a pro teacher, but let me see. And that's what it's called. It's $8.50 a month. Well, that's what it said, but no, that was a Google thing. Apparently, it's $13.75 a month, which is probably when it's billed yearly. So $13.75 times 12, apparently.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not free, but
yeah,
I found it useful, so I got it, and it was cheaper than the program that I had been using, and that program had become fairly exorbitant. But this has been about the same price for a while now.
Do they offer institutional discounts if we have a number
That
of
is the
individuals?
educational. It's
Okay.
created for educators, so
Okay.
yeah. But, you know, if you just want to play around with it, you can create 20. You can always delete them and create 20 new ones, or, you know, you could try it in one class, and 20 would be a decent number to at least experiment with. You know, or you could use it just for those topics that you know that students tend to have trouble with, and just sprinkle them throughout your class.
Yes, that's true. That's true. I guess as soon as we go, we all need an AI pack now. Like we have Office 365 with all these things and Creative Cloud with all these things. So I guess AI, a combination of things in there would definitely help.
Yeah, I find it useful, and my students have generally been really positive about it. And the reactions to this was much better than the other program I was using, where they had to leave Brightspace to answer the questions, and then I had to upload the grades every week, you know, and then upgrade new grades if they went back and attempted them later. The other program was much more flexible with more question types. It would auto grade free response questions, or at least a range of them. It would do numeric questions. You know, this is a little bit more limited, but the integration with Brightspace makes my work so much easier. And I can quickly see how they're doing, and they can see how they're doing right in their gradebook without me having to go through and upload, you know, 250 or so student grades every week.
Yeah, yeah. And so it automatically integrates into the grade center the
It
way
does. The
some
only
of the publishers' books do these days.
Yes,
Okay.
there's only two minor things. One is when it will create a gradebook column for each of them with the title that you've given it. But you have to put it in a category. So you do have to edit it once new ones are added, because they only show up after the first students complete one of the videos. So as soon as the first video is completed, you would just go into your managed gradebook and edit that grade book item and add it to whatever you call those. I call them, I think, EdPuzzles or EdPuzzle video quizzes or something like that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
If you use a video from Panopto, does it have to be like just video, or could it be one of those like hybrids where it's a video and a like a double screen? Like,
Yes. I'm not sure where the question would be embedded though, because in Panopto, you could have multiple screens. You could have one for slides, you could have one for a doc camera, you could have one for, you know, mobile device connected to it. I think what will happen is wherever you get to that point in the stream of videos where students can either watch, you know, some panel of multiple displays, or they could just choose one of them. When it gets to the point where the question is embedded, it would ask them the question. But again, each question becomes its own gradebook item, which is why I didn't find it that useful. And it was also much harder to find a good breakpoint. It seemed to be a little bit softer in terms of when it actually stopped. So when I tried it, it would often stop in the middle of the word, and I just wasn't able to get it to time the pauses very well. But again, Panopto can work. And especially if you're only doing one question per video, and that's already built in and it goes into the gradebook. One minor issue with Panopto, though, is that our class accounts are wiped out, I think, a year or so after they've been used. So anything that you create in there disappears, basically, although I think some of it goes into an archive for a while. And I like having the videos out on YouTube or in these devices, because that way they stay there and we don't have to worry about them being deleted as we run out of storage space in the Panopto cloud. But there are other tools. You know, this one just seemed like one of the easiest ones. And if you're doing 20 or fewer videos, it's free, and there's a lot to be said for free. So if you do try it, let me know how it works. And again, you can always use videos that other people created. Javed, I've got lots of videos for microeconomics if you wanted to play with any of those. You could grab 20 of them and put them in the course if you found them, useful.
Yeah, I have searched the economics topics and I have found many topics, and that was so interesting.
And you create your own versions of them. So if you don't like the questions that other people put there, you could, replace them, put your own variants on. Okay, any other questions? Now, I'm not sure why some of the things did not seem to be working. They had been, but overall, it's been remarkably consistent. Students haven't had any problems accessing them, and they can play them on a smartphone, on a laptop, on a Chromebook, and so it's kind of device independent, and pretty much all students have at least a mobile device or access to one. Now, if they're in a library, they may have to wear headsets, or they could just turn the captions on and use that for it. Okay, well, if you do try this and you have any questions, let me know. I'm happy to help out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll stop the recording.